A single redrawn map just blew up decades of political alliances in Florida, turning old friends into bitter enemies overnight.
Oh, yeah. Like literal enemies.
Yeah.
It is wild down there.
It really is. So welcome to today's deep dive. We are jumping right into a massive political mess. Governor Ron DeSantis and the Florida legislature recently redrew the state's electoral maps.
Right, the new congressional districts.
Exactly. And that move completely wiped out the safety net for longtime Democratic Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Her district was brutally chopped up into 5 different pieces.
It's just completely scattered.
Yeah, totally dismantled. So what did she do? Instead of staying and fighting in a new conservative-leaning district, she is eyeing the safely blue, predominantly black 20th district right next door.
Which did not go over well.
Not at all. This single decision has triggered an all-out civil war within the local Democratic Party. And to understand the sheer scale of this fight, we are looking at a stack of political notes, and we are heavily analyzing a fiery right-wing podcast by Brian Maxwell.
Yeah, Maxwell's show. It is intense.
Very. His commentary gives us a front-row seat to the conservative perspective on this chaotic intra-party battle. But looking at the sheer panic this map caused, I have to ask you, are we watching a genuine battle to protect racial representation, or is this just a ruthless game of musical chairs where the losers get kicked out of Congress?
Well, the answer heavily depends on who you ask, and honestly, the tension between those two ideas is driving this entire conflict.
Right.
But to understand the fallout, we first have to look at the mechanics of the map itself. Because the physical lines drawn by the state legislature, they are the catalyst here.
Yeah, they literally force politicians who normally work together onto a direct collision course.
Exactly. And the conservative podcast we are analyzing, well, Maxwell frames those new lines as a massive victory.
He does. He argues that these new maps end what he calls democratic racial gerrymandering.
Right. He hates the old maps. He paints a picture of them as these weird octopus-shaped districts.
Oh, yeah. He says they just snake through specific neighborhoods just to guarantee safe seats for Democrats.
Exactly. So from his right-wing vantage point, fixing those weird shapes forces politicians to actually compete for votes. He thinks they should not be coasting on a rigged system.
He focuses heavily on that idea of fair competition. But, I mean, to grasp how Florida even had the authority to drastically change those lines, we need to look at the legal mechanics behind the scenes.
Yeah, because this mapping chaos did not just happen in a vacuum. One of our sources, Professor Charles Zeldin, notes this is the direct result of the Supreme Court gutting the Voting Rights Act a few years ago.
Wait, how exactly did that change the rule book for Florida?
Well, it removed a mechanism called preclearance.
Preclearance, right?
Yeah. So for decades, states with a history of discriminatory voting practices had to ask the federal government for permission before they altered their voting maps.
Like a hall pass.
Basically, yeah. They had to prove the new maps would not hurt minority representation. But when the Supreme Court erased that preclearance formula, state legislatures suddenly gained massive power.
They could just redraw lines without that immediate federal oversight.
Exactly. And that sudden shift is what allowed the Florida legislature to draw a map that completely dismantled established power bases.
Which brings us right back to Congresswoman Wasserman Schultz. She argues her political base was totally destroyed.
I mean, it was.
Yeah, exactly. One district was chopped up into 5 separate pieces, and her voters were scattered all over the state map. It is like a homeowner whose house gets bulldozed by the city, right?
Oh, that is a good way to look at it.
Yeah, so instead of rebuilding in the rubble, they decide to just move into their neighbor's perfectly intact house without asking.
And to push that homeowner analogy a little further, the neighbor already has a very large, very established family living in that house.
Right. They're not just going to leave.
No way. District 20 is not just a random piece of real estate. It has been an absolute anchor of black political power in Florida. It has been held by a black lawmaker for 30 straight years.
Wow, 30 years.
Yeah. That represents 3 decades of local infrastructure, community ties, cultural representation. I mean, they are not simply going to hand over the keys to an outsider.
Especially when the person knocking on the door has a $2.5 million campaign bank account.
Exactly. Which brings in a whole new layer of tension here.
Oh, big time. Because Wasserman Schultz brings massive corporate-funded resources to the table, the current district leaders are throwing up barricades.
Huge barricades.
And they are using a very specific cultural and political defense to keep her out. They're making this a battle over lived experience.
Right, lived experience. You hear that phrase constantly in modern politics.
Constantly. Because she is maneuvering for this seat, local black leaders are drawing a hard line in the sand. Like State Senator Rosalind Osgood makes a very pointed argument about it.
What does she say exactly?
Well, she says a white incumbent armed with millions in corporate cash simply cannot understand the black lived experience. You know, District 20 struggles heavily with high poverty and crime.
So she is saying you need someone who gets it.
Exactly. Osgood argues that you need to have personally lived through those specific systemic challenges to effectively write laws that fix them.
And the local leaders back up that philosophical argument with a really stark statistical warning.
What is the warning?
They calculate that if Wasserman Schultz wins this specific seat, Florida could drop down to having only one black representative in Congress.
Just one. Wow.
Just one. So for these advocates, shared lived experiences provide crucial role models for the youth. They argue that young kids in struggling neighborhoods need to see leaders in Washington who look like them, leaders who understand their daily reality.
But the conservative source pushes back on that entire concept with incredible aggression.
Oh, Maxwell does not hold back at all.
No, he doesn't. In his podcast, Maxwell completely dismisses the lived experience argument. He literally labels the phrase a manipulative dog whistle.
A dog whistle, wow.
Yeah, he calls it a smokescreen, designed to hide basic cutthroat political power grabs. He argues that politicians only weaponize that phrase when they need an excuse to eliminate a strong rival.
And he claims the moral outrage from these local leaders is entirely manufactured.
Yeah, and he doesn't just make the claim out of nowhere, right? He points to a very specific historical example to argue his case.
Right, the Steve Cohen example. He brings up Steve Cohen to highlight what he sees as massive hypocrisy on the left.
The Steve Cohen example is fascinating. So for context, Steve Cohen is a white, gay, Jewish congressman.
Okay.
And he has represented a heavily black working-class district in Memphis, Tennessee for 19 years.
19 years in office. That is a long time.
Yeah. And Maxwell notes that during all those years, the National Democratic Party never once complained about Cohen lacking the lived experience of his poor black constituents in Memphis.
They just funded him and kept him in power.
Exactly. They supported him the whole way.
Yeah.
So this raises a massive contradiction in the political rulebook.
How so?
Well, if lived experience is an absolute non-negotiable requirement for representation, like Senator Osgood claims, how does the party justify nearly 2 decades of Steve Cohen in Memphis?
That is a fair question.
Right. Does the rule magically change depending on who holds the most campaign cash?
And that contradiction is the exact wedge Maxwell uses to dismantle the opposing argument.
He really leans into it.
Yeah, he uses the Memphis example to argue that lived experience is not a core moral value for the party leadership. Instead, he claims it is merely a weapon of convenience.
Just a tool to win.
Exactly. In his view, when a politician with $2.5 million threatens local control in Florida, suddenly lived experience becomes the ultimate disqualifier. But when a white incumbent safely holds a seat in Tennessee, the concept completely vanishes from the conversation.
Which implies this fight isn't really a deep philosophical debate about representation at all.
Not even a little bit.
It actually just masks a wild, scandal-plagued scramble for the seat itself. I mean, if you look at the cast of characters fighting for District 20, it feels less like a noble defense of the community and more like a chaotic free-for-all.
Oh, the source material outlines a completely chaotic field of candidates. And Maxwell leverages this chaos to argue that the entire situation is driven by raw greed.
He goes after them hard.
He really does. He specifically targets local leaders like Senator Osgood, labeling them the black bourgeoisie.
Man, he uses incredibly loaded language there.
He does. He says they act like overseers who do not actually share the working class struggles of the district they claim to protect.
So he thinks they are just elites.
Yeah, he paints them as elevated, wealthy families who use identity politics purely to keep their grip on power.
And when you look at the actual scandals unfolding in this race, it is hard to look away from the sheer dysfunction. Like, we have to talk about Sheila Trifolis McCormick.
Oh, her story is wild. It is central to understanding the mechanics of this power struggle.
Tell me about it.
Well, she actually held this very congressional seat, but she resigned amid a massive ethics investigation.
A massive one.
Yeah, the investigation involved the theft of $5 million in FEMA funds.
$5 million in federal funds meant for disaster relief.
Money meant for people who literally lost everything.
And the wildest part of this entire scenario, she is running for the exact same seat again.
I know, it is crazy.
Just months after resigning under the cloud of a $5 million scandal, she is right back on the ballot asking for votes.
And she is not operating in a vacuum, you know. She actually has prominent defenders.
Right. Another major candidate in this race is Luther Campbell, famously known to the public as the rapper Uncle Luke.
Oh, Uncle Luke, he has massive cultural cachet in Florida.
He does. And now he is running for Congress. He publicly attacks Wasserman Schultz, calling her power-hungry and politically greedy.
He really goes after her.
Yeah, he claims she made shady backroom deals to take over the district. But at the exact same time he is attacking Wasserman Schultz for political greed, he shockingly defends McCormick.
Wait, he defends the $5 million FEMA scandal.
He defends her candidacy. He attempts to shift the blame to other politicians for the missing federal funds.
You are kidding.
Nope. He publicly claims the missing millions were just a simple wiring mistake and viciously attacks anyone who points the finger at her for accountability.
And Maxwell points directly at this bizarre dynamic.
Oh, I bet he loves that.
He does. He argues this is absolute proof of blind racial identity politics overriding basic accountability.
How so?
Well, from the conservative viewpoint, local leaders will fiercely defend a candidate who lost $5 million of taxpayer disaster relief simply because she is an insider of the same race.
Right.
Meanwhile, they relentlessly attack an outsider who wants to run for the seat.
So he uses this stark contrast to argue that the party infrastructure prioritizes racial identity over actual community service.
And ethical governance. Yeah.
Wow. And the final piece of evidence Maxwell uses to cement this theory comes back to Senator Osgood herself.
Oh, the interview.
Yeah, during a local interview, Osgood admits that if Wasserman Schultz drops out of the race, she might jump in and run to the seat herself.
That is a stunning admission.
It really is. I mean, think about it. She is leading the charge on television, arguing that Wasserman Schultz must be kept out to protect the community's representation.
Right.
But quietly, she is preparing to take the highly lucrative seat for herself.
Unbelievable.
It is like a hostile corporate takeover, where the executives go on TV claiming they are fighting to protect the factory workers. But the second the current CEO steps down, they instantly start stabbing each other in the back over the corner office.
That is exactly what it is like. And the executives fighting for that corner office also happen to have federal ethics investigations on their resumes.
Exactly.
It just captures the sheer, unfiltered political survival happening on the ground. If we connect this local chaos back to the bigger picture, the redrawn maps successfully force these politicians into a political cage match.
They are violently fighting over a shrinking number of safe seats.
Yeah. This fierce battle for District 20 shows how quickly decades of supposedly rock-solid political alliances shatter.
They shattered the second a guaranteed seat in Congress, a massive salary, and $2.5 million are on the line.
And the situation reveals an incredibly ugly tension operating just beneath the surface of modern politics.
What do you mean?
Well, on one side, you have high-minded rhetoric about identity politics, community defense, and historical representation. But on the other side, you have the cold, hard reality of self-preservation and political survival.
And Florida is just the testing ground for this dynamic.
Oh, absolutely.
As these electoral maps get redrawn nationwide by state legislatures, this exact script is going to play out in districts all over the country.
It is coming everywhere.
This brutal turf war is coming to your state's backyard. Whenever you watch the news and hear politicians repeating buzzwords like lived experience or saving representation, you should always look at the mechanics of the map and follow the money.
Always follow the money.
You have to ask yourself who actually stands to gain the power. The grand rhetoric is often just a smokescreen masking a desperate fight for a shrinking number of chairs.
A game of musical chairs.
Exactly. So as redistricting continues to eliminate safe districts nationwide for both parties, the political landscape is becoming much more hostile. And it leaves us with this thought. Will political parties eventually abandon identity politics altogether, simply backing whichever candidate has a big enough bank account to self-fund their survival in a highly competitive map?